Hello everybody, this is a short video which is going with the blog post I wrote about the number one problem that teachers experience, the number one weakness in teaching. And it's a weakness not because people aren't trying, it's because it's just a hard thing to deal with. And it's that when you're teaching a group of people, it's really difficult to know in a dynamic way how well everybody's doing. And it's actually quite easy not to notice that certain students aren't making the progress you're hoping, because of the dynamics of the class. And actually you can sit next to a student as an observer who isn't understanding, who hasn't remembered anything, and who can't say the things they're supposed to be able to, and the teacher doesn't really even notice because they're busy, because their mind is full of so many things. So we need to be conscious of this issue so that we can address it. And in the blog post I talk about it in the context of 6 different areas. So the first one is simply the mindset that it's easy to fall into, which is that we're just grateful that somebody knows something, or that some people know some of the stuff. So we get some answers from some students who may be enthusiastic, engaged, and we go, yeah, fantastic, and we engage with those responses because that makes us feel that we're on the right track. But that can mask us to the fact that the students around the room are not on the same page and are not achieving. So a switch in mindset would be, does everybody know all of it? Have we all got all of it, or are you all with me? And when you're looking for all, you're actually checking who hasn't, and it's a different kind of focus. Who isn't with me? Who hasn't got it? And if there's a list of, say, 6 factors or 6 things to learn, have you all got all 6, or who's only got 4? And then what are the 2 you haven't got? And it's much more precise and focused on the gaps rather than the kind of the feeling that people sort of seem to know things. And I think that big shift is actually the most important thing to do, and that leads to all the other things. The next area is testing protocols. So if you're testing students to check whether they know things, again, it's the important thing to consider is, do all of the students get all the answers right? And then obviously then we go down from there. Of course that won't be true. So which students have got some wrong, and which ones did they get wrong? And then we talk about the errors, we talk about the gaps, we talk about the misconceptions, and that's where the teaching flows in. So when you're doing a test of, say, 20 students on 10 questions, that's like 200 bits of information, and you've got to design a test that's easy to do. So it's much more efficient if they can all check all their answers at the same time, and then you can ask them, how many did you get wrong, and then you can talk about the wrong answers. But I have seen teachers literally do 10 questions by asking one at a time and getting one answer to each question from 10 students, and being pleased that, say, somebody knew each of the answers. And again, not checking, well, who hasn't got it nearly robustly enough. So efficient testing protocols, which are looking for error and looking for the students who aren't quite there, is really key. Exposition without checking. This is a classic one. I think this is quite funny, really, because we've probably all done this. You can kid yourself into thinking you're the great raconteur. I'm the storyteller, the narrator. I've got them hanging off every word. I'm witty, I'm charming, I'm explaining this really well. And sometimes people think, well, that's got to do the job, right? So you tell the story and you kind of assume that's just hitting home. And sometimes I'm in a lesson where, the teacher is fantastic to listen to. You could listen to them all day long. But you kind of want to say, okay, stop for a second and just check. This would be a good moment to pause and say, right, is everybody with me? Right, John, what was the main point of the last section that I explained? Or let me just check you understand it. Who's with me? And checking for understanding, and just keeping people with you, making sure that your message you think you're giving is actually being heard, understood, making sense. And that is a simple thing to do. But gosh, it's so easy to be fooled into thinking that the entertainment that you're generating, the engagement and the interest is enough, and it so often isn't. If someone can explain back to you in their own words the thing you think you've explained really well, then you know that you're getting through, and if multiple students can do that, even better. The next one is weak questioning and response technique. So questioning, again, it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the spontaneous responses from a few students represents the rest. And this is one of the laws of teaching, as I see it, which is that whenever you have calling out or hands up as the default response, there are always students in those lessons who never answer any questions at all. That's almost universal. So that means that those students are sitting there in the lesson, not really thinking as hard as the rest, not trying to formulate answers, and there could be multiple students like that. So it's quite common to see a lesson where 4 or 5 students dominate the entire exchange, and the rest are sort of passive in the sense that they're not being made to formulate answers. They might be listening, of course, but you don't know they are, and also you don't know what they're thinking. So cold call questioning, for example, where every student knows it could be them to have to answer, is much more effective than a calling out mode. And there are multiple other questioning strategies which keep everybody in the loop of thinking, responding, engaging. And the teacher orchestrates and controls who answers and who is needing to be paying attention and thinking, rather than the students just spontaneously volunteering or opting out. And that's a really common thing. And the 5th one is excessive scaffolding. So one of the reasons why we can sometimes mask students' true lack of understanding is because we help them too much. You know, it's just too easy to assemble the task from the instructions that are available. So you can write a sentence in French using the knowledge organizer, the crib sheet, the little pyramid of words on the desk, the words on the wall. And I've sat in lessons of languages which I have no understanding of and been able to do the task with all of the supports available. Now that doesn't mean I know it, that doesn't mean I can do it on my own. And often it's the weaker students who use all these things like a constant crutch, and the teacher needs to do that thing of, okay, now close your book, now try to remember it, now try to do it by yourself, and take the scaffolding down. And that can apply to numerous situations where excessive scaffolding, excessive support is undermining students' learning, in fact. So we need to be really aware of that and always have in mind, okay, here's how you do it, let me show you the way to do it in a supported way, but now, over to you. Now have a go by yourself. And it's got to be not in a group, because then a group dominates an individual who's weak as well. And it's got to be by yourself. Can you do it? Do you know it? Can you explain it? And that part of the learning process must be there if we're really going to check that every single student can do things. Last of all, it's vocabulary. This is something which is such a fundamental aspect of teaching. Can the students say and use the words that we are trying to teach them? And even at this basic level, I see gaps there where a teacher is trying to explain a concept, a word. It could be something like erosion. You know, that could be the word. The rocks are eroded by the water. The water erodes the rocks. The process is called erosion. So the word erosion has lots of forms depending on how it's used. And students don't just come into the geography context knowing how to say erosion. And they don't just pick it up because you're saying it. So it doesn't matter how many times you say erosion, erodes, eroded by. The weaker students in the class won't use that word, because it's not one of theirs. So you need to construct conspicuously designed activities where you have to use the terminology. So that means you have to get people talking. And you can either do that with lots of rapid fire one-to-one, or it can be in pairs, which I think is an excellent thing to do, get everyone talking through the process in their pair. It can be chorally even, everybody saying the words. However you do it, you've got to get people to say the words, define the words, become sort of comfortable with the words as part of their vocabulary, their repertoire, not belonging to somewhere else. And then if you don't do that, what happens is the students fill in the gap with some alternative word or a poorer version of the word. So if you want everyone to learn all the words that you are using in your technical vocabulary, then make them all say the words as part of an activity early on. Make them feel them coming out of their mouth, inhabit those words, and then they can apply them, use them in context much more fluently. So all of these things are part of this issue of filling in the gaps, looking for error, looking for students who are struggling, and giving them a chance to succeed. And it's all doable, but the main thing is to be conscious of it as an issue, and to be always aware that just because we've got some success doesn't mean everybody is with you. And in fact, probably they're not. And with that in mind, you're going to make much better decisions, be much more inclusive, and get into the corners of the room much more regularly. And more of your students are going to learn more and be more successful in your lessons.